This is part 5 of the active shooter response training that was developed and used by the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health. And Michael Melton will be your instructor. This course has been taught in person and as an online course most recently. Uh, in part 5, we'll have the first of the military tactics. And then in part 6A and B, we'll have a video and then the second group of military tactics. So, for the first military tactic that we'll be talking about is Colonel Boyd's OODA loop. The OODA is short for observe, orient, decide, and act. Colonel Boyd was developed this, was using it in the Korean War. He was flying prop planes, and he was the most successful fighter pilot of that era at all. He fought both prop planes and jets flown by his enemy in that war. And he was able to use these observe, orient, decide, and act highly effectively, shooting down enemy planes and avoiding being shot down himself. And then subsequently, he was brought to the training for new pilots, and he taught them this strategy. This later representation of his OODA loop is the most complex representation that he developed, that shows how each of the different components has subcomponents. But it also shows importantly that there's feedback involved at every stage. So when you at first observe, it's partially dependent on what your prior information is and the unfolding circumstances. Then you orient is really where your background, education, culture comes into place in understanding what's occurring and understanding what your options are to select. And in the decide phase is when you weigh the different capability of those options and which ones seem most appropriate to the situation you've oriented and decided. And then you act on those different decisions using the one or two that you selected as your action, but always giving feedback throughout the situation. What was part of this in his success was the fact that he said that he was able to maintain superiority in his fighter pilot flight over his adversary because he went through the observe and orient phase rapidly, reaching the decide and act phase while his adversary was still in the orient and decide phase. And then once Colonel Boyd had acted, the environment had changed for the adversary, and the adversary had to begin again at the observe and orient. So I use the example, we actually, all of us use this kind of decision process on a regular basis. We just hadn't necessarily identified its four components. So, just as an example, envision that you're going to use a multi lane highway, possibly an interstate, but a multi lane highway to reach a destination. And so you're driving on that multi lane highway and you start to get to approach where you would exit for your destination. So you now begin to engage in the decision making process that allows you to exit in a safe manner. So you're observing where you're at in terms of the distance to your exit, which lane you're in, orienting about how many cars are traffic is in the opposing lane next to you if you have to change lanes, how fast they're going, what's the spacing between them, and finding the opportunity that you could change lanes into the lane that you need to get into in order to exit, and you achieve those multiple, sometimes lane changes as necessary, so that you're able to exit at the appropriate time. So you can just see that this would be a series of observe, orient, decide, and act until you were safely off of the multi-lane road and at the position that you needed to be in order to reach your destination. So that really is a logical application of the OODA loop. But now we want to get to the application that Colonel Boyd was so effective at, the application where there's an adversary. So in your mind now, just adjust that situation. You're headed toward a pre-selected designation, but suddenly you find yourself in a situation where there's some kind of an emergency. The emergency might be something wrong with your vehicle. Perhaps you have a flat tire, or perhaps you have uh, a light go on the vehicle. So that's changing your situation. But what if the emergency is an actual adversary, such as a road rage situation? Now you need to make decisions in a manner that allows you to get free of the threat of the road rage situation. So that's where Colonel Boyd's practice of reaching the decide and action phase as expeditiously as possible, so that working to the disadvantage of the adversary, which would maybe the adversary would still be in the observe or orient stage, you might speed up and go in front of a large truck, and that allows you to exit. You might change the destination that you're going to and exit suddenly to go to a public place or to go to a police station. So this is the way that the OODA loop works with an adversary. So in the case of a active shooter situation, you're going to be applying these observe, orient, decide, and act situations, observing, looking for active exit doors, even looking for non-traditional exits, which could be windows, could be windows that don't open, and you use a large object of furniture to break the window out to allow yourself to exit. Uh, you're looking for secure rooms. Possibly you've previously identified rooms that could be safer rooms. You're looking for concealed spaces within that room, possibly cabinets, but especially maybe cover or other kinds of concealment. And then for fighting, you're looking for both improvised weapons, but also who might be available to help you. The orient is the relationship of the threat and yourself. So if the threat is firing, you might want to run a zigzag path instead of a straight path. But if the threat is some distance away, then the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So you might want to run away as fast as you can in a straight line. So you're orienting yourself to the threat in order to choose what's the right course of escape, what's the right course of cover versus concealment and use of the rings of protection for layering, and then the objects for improvised weapons or a shield. You notice there that I have an image of a pair of scissors. A pair of scissors certainly can be a sharp object if you use them with the 2 points together. You might consider removing the pin to separate the blades into two blades, and now you have one in each hand, but you also have a more sharp pointed penetrating device as a weapon if you're able to separate the blades of the scissors into two. The flagpole, certainly you can envision using the flagpole as a weapon. You could use, sometimes those poles have a joint, or you could break them in half and end up with a sharp pointed stick instead of a dull pointed stick. But did you think about the metal base that's holding the flagpole? If you grab that metal base and hold it up, you have a shield for deflecting objects, and potentially even that shield would have a heavy enough metal to either stop or significantly slow down a bullet. So you have some protection of your core body area by holding that metal base. So those are just examples of orienting your defensive tactics. And now you have to decide. This is based on the situational awareness that you're confronted with at that moment in time. Your common operating picture is a moment in time. And then you act, and that changes your circumstances, whether you ran, you hid, or you fought. And then you reassess and get ready to take your next action. So you must have that feedback loop of what is the next action and the next action. You want to be a little like the chess player where you're thinking 4 and 5 moves in advance as part of this action. So that concludes the part 5. In part 6, we're going to be watching an additional video and then talk about additional military strategies that you might use. This, once again, is Michael Melton's contact information.